you. I feel like I should shuffle in a dance step or something with that kind of intro. Thank you so much, Randy, Greg, and all Rotarians for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today about what I think is probably the most important issue for our community, developing the talent we need to fuel Louisville's global competitiveness and prosperity, and to create a higher standard of living for all of our citizens. So I think I last spoke with you when, and do I do this myself? Yeah, here we go. When we first kicked off a 10-year initiative back in 2010 called 55,000 Degrees. And today we're at the midpoint of that 10 years. And so it's my goal to update you a bit on how we've been doing, where we've progressed, and where we need to focus to accelerate and close those remaining gaps. All of you understand this is a competitiveness issue. Business understands that better than most, both for Louisville and for our entire country. The U.S. once the top in all education rankings and the envy of the world, and its higher education system has fallen behind. We are standing still while other countries are educating many more of their young people. Combined with the portability of jobs, the higher order thinking skills that are required in an innovation, technology-driven economy, the pressure is to increase education at all levels, raising standards in our public education system, and also increasing the education attainment levels. And we need to do that if we want to maintain our American dream of an ever-expanding quality of life and unparalleled equality of opportunity. So many of you have heard stories of recent college grads not being able to find jobs. But really, those are anecdotes, not trends. Data affirm that each level of education marks an improvement, both in your ability to get a job and the wages that you earn. If you note on this chart, the area that has the lowest unemployment here is a bachelor's degree. This is Louisville. We also have, so we know that education pays, but we also need to understand who's getting educated in America. There's persistent disparities in income, race, and ethnicity. And this chart really tells the story, the difference between the haves and the have-nots, the growing gap. In 1970, no surprise that children from well-off families were more likely to get a degree than children from families on the lower end of the economic scale. But by 2010, that gap had really widened. The percentage of already well-off young people getting a degree has doubled. But virtually no change among the people in the lowest income quartile. Education is the key to prosperity, and the children of the well-off are 7 times more likely to get such a key. So, to succeed, we've got to really focus on the 21st century student. Who are they? First, they're working. 75% of all students and undergrads enrolled are juggling family, work, and career. And they are also older. We've got a rapidly growing population of adult students. Second, they are students of color. Last year, Donna Harkins can tell you, JCPS for the first time had a majority of their students coming from minority race or ethnic groups, making that word minority meaningless. You can see the stats. A few weeks back, it was announced that there was a report that came out that the majority of children in the U.S. under the age of 5 are minority. And by 2018, the majority of children under the age of 18 will be. So to paraphrase Walt Whitman, we contain a multitude. So this is a challenge because historically, we as a country have not had equal education outcomes and among all race and ethnic groups. Now these gaps stem from historic structural inequities and disparities, and from opportunity and experience gaps, particularly among low income. As we become a more diverse city and country, we must focus on correcting those gaps. So we have an equity imperative as well as the economic imperative to level the playing field and to increase post-secondary education for all. In other words, it's both the right thing to do and it's absolutely necessary for our future economy. And last, the typical college includes, when we think of college, you often think of that, tree-lined, residential, beautiful libraries, places you stay. But really, only 1 in 5 college students today are enrolled in a residential college. Many of them are taking online programs. And almost half of all undergraduates in America attend community college, that 2-year community and technical college. The opportunity for access in our country. As you see in this chart, community college students comprise large percentages of all our undergraduate, particularly for the underrepresented populations. So focusing on improving our community colleges is particularly important to help our most vulnerable in the access that payoff of higher education. The partners who understood this,
55,000 degrees.
I'll tell you about this video.
Kentucky's Bold Challenge, launched in the fall of 2010 to increase the percentage of our city's working-age adults with college degrees.
And we're at a real inflection point, a real transition for the country right now. We face a lot of challenges that other cities face, and that is a transition to an innovation-oriented economy. So education is just fundamental to making this transition. So that's why 55,000 degrees is so important.
55,000 degrees, a movement, a partnership between business, government, and education leaders, all who want to improve quality of life in our city by increasing the numbers of college-educated individuals. 55,000 more with college degrees by the year 2020. That's 50% of Louisville's working population with a college degree.
We have so many people engaged in this community now in this goal to reach 50% of our population with a college degree. And the data is actually confirming that we've reached the highest point ever in our history. At 41.3% of working age people in Louisville have an associate's degree or higher. But we also know that there are challenges ahead because we're not quite yet on track of the pace we need to be to get there by 2020.
To make 55,000 degrees by 2020 a reality, the Count Me In campaign allows our entire city to pledge to make the commitment. Count Me In reaches out to students, businesses, civic organizations, churches, and citizens. We all have the talents, skills, and resources to make 55,000 degrees a reality.
But we need mentors, we need support, we need a massive community conversation to make sure we achieve 55,000 degrees and beyond. We'll change Louisville one student at a time.
I wanted to share that with you because, as you might have guessed, you all helped us make that video. We used some of the footage from the Rotary. You all have been right there when we announced the 55,000 degrees 5 years ago in 2010. It was the same time you were announcing the Rotary Promise Scholarship, so you've been a great companion. And what are some of the other actions that we have been doing? We've really taken a collective impact approach to this, which means we spend our time, there's 4 staff of ours, my colleague Dr. Lily Massa-McKinley is here with me today. So we put out an annual report, which you have here, that measures our progress each year. We've also been tracking indicators, and you can dig down into that data on our data dashboard. And then we convene groups to try to say, well, what does this data mean and how can we move ahead? A good example of one is when we saw that 20% of JCPS high school grads who intend to go to college were not actually ending up attending. And so we called that summer MELT, and we have a network of partners who are working on that. And this summer, 360 students are getting one-on-one coaching by near peers or text nudges to remind them of things that they need to do to stay on track. And you may have read about this effort in last week in a front page story in the Courier Journal. So how are we doing? Well, I had mentioned, we talked a little bit about what our goal is, and I mentioned in that previous video that we're at our highest level ever with 41.5% of our population with an associate's degree or higher, and that's higher than the national average. And since we started, we've added 22,000 degrees according to the census. But we're not on track to reach our goal to have 50% with a college degree by 2020. We're halfway there in our time frame, but we're not halfway there in our numbers. At our current pace, it would take an additional 10 years to meet 2030 to reach our 50% goal. So we need to do more. These are the things that our recent progress reports say highlight some of the things that are working. First, JCPS is making real strides when it comes to college and career readiness. 61% of the class of 2014 was considered college and career ready in 2014, and that is 30 percentage points higher than in 2010. It's an increase also across the board in all ethnic groups, though a 32-point gap still remains between white and African American students. Also, more JCPS students are graduating high school, 79% in 2014. Also, our higher education institutions are producing. They're producing, many more people are getting degrees, with the number of undergraduate degrees each year in this community reaching almost 10,000. And that's about 20% higher than when we started. And remember the trend of the older non-traditional student? Well, notably, adult students make up 54% of the degrees awarded in this area. There are other indicators, however, that are moving in the wrong direction. Among the most troubling is the decline in college-going rates from our high schools and decline in college enrollment. So while more Jefferson High School County JCPS students are graduating high school, the actual percentage of them that are going on to college has declined. And it's actually about a 7-point decline over 4 years since 2008. Now, given the difficulty of supporting a family with only a high school degree in the mid-21st century, it's devastating to see a decline in college enrollment. And similarly, we have fewer people enrolled in college than when we began. 7,400, in fact. And when you think about the economic impact on 7,400 families in our community, these two things are really potentially catastrophic. So what is stopping people from going to college and completing degrees? For sure, rising costs. You all know about the increase and hear about it a lot, and those concerns about cost and value may be causing high school graduates and adults that are thinking about going back to veer off of that path. And as employment has picked up, fewer of those adults are returning to finish. We've had a 15% decline in adult enrollment, and African American enrollment saw a 16% drop. So a challenge then is to communicate to students and potential students what a college degree will mean to them and what the return on investment is for the time, work, and money it takes to complete post-secondary education. Last month, our board took the opportunity at this midpoint to take a sort of reset. So we stepped back, we started with, this whole sort of grew out of us comparing ourselves to other competitor cities. And we looked again at that. Well, we have really not risen very much in our ranking among our peer cities, cities like Charlotte and Columbus and Cincinnati. We have moved slightly ahead of Birmingham. We just sort of switched places, but we're basically the same. And what else do we know? Well, when you look at our Mayor Abramson and his team, I worked 8 years for Mayor Abramson, so forgive me for that. Mayor Fisher and his team have really been digging into the wage data, and we have also been falling behind in average income and wages. This is a hard chart to see, but just basically you can see that Louisville in red and Nashville, years ago, we were pretty close in our median wages and in the number of the growth of high-skill, high-paid jobs, but Nashville has leaped far ahead of us, as have many other of our similar cities. Another sobering fact is that since 1984, Louisville's average wages have been declining steadily in comparison to the U.S. average. So we are falling behind in wages. At the same time, we know that post-secondary education in our community will be required for 3/4 of the living wage jobs that are going to be produced over the next 10 years. This chart shows the projected growth by education level for jobs earning above the living wage, which is about $37,000, that have positive growth forecasts. Now, we hear from many employers, particularly those in advanced manufacturing, that the college for all message makes it hard for them to recruit or to get people to think about pathways that lead to their careers. But remember my point, college includes technical and 2-year associate degrees, and there are also many post-secondary certificates and vocational tracks that earn good wages. Those people are getting credentials, about 8% you see here in this certificate is going to be needed in the growth. And in our actual post-secondary production in this town, about those pre-baccalaureate certificates comprise about 23% of all post-secondary awards in Louisville. So our next step that we're going to be doing is trying to figure out which ones of those are the right ones that earn a living wage above $37,000. Some of them are truck drivers, LPNs, aircraft maintenance, things like that. So we're refining our message. It is clear today that good paying jobs require more education, and that we need to make sure parents and students understand this. We must also clearly demonstrate the value of a college degree. That includes the value has been, you can see lots of evidence out there. I'm just going to quote one from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, that a college degree has an annual return on investment of 15%. And we know that 3 years after graduation, high school graduates in Kentucky are earning less than $12,000 a year. Less than $12,000 a year. That's below poverty line for a single person. At the same time, in Jefferson County, adults with a bachelor's degree earned on average 70% more than their counterparts with a high school diploma. That's about $1 million over a lifetime. So we need to add to our message that some credentials earn more, some programs, some certificates, the major matters, that helps. But one of the surprising data is that only about 1/3 to 1/2 of our local area graduates are employed in the region 5 years after graduating. So that raises the question of whether people are not finding jobs for what they studied, or whether they're not being paid enough, or why are they not employed here? Well, so one way to retain local graduates is to better understand the workforce opportunities by major. And that's what this chart is showing, that projected growth in Louisville, target industry clusters. These are the ones that we've said we want to grow. Those that require some post-secondary education, pay above the living wage, and have positive growth forecasts are mostly coming from white-collar office jobs. That's 50% of that business services. So the takeaways, we must continue to address critical leaks in our system to improve college-going rates. I've got my things backwards. Let me just tell you this. I think this is great. This slide shows you that Louisville has an advantage. Rather than the finger pointing that the 55K and that many cities are experiencing, our 55K partnership took the collective impact approach. And we've got business, education, civic, community leaders focusing on a common goal and agenda. A shared measurement system, mutually aligned reinforcing activities. And this alignment and focus is so powerful. You've heard the mayor speak about taking this framework across the cradle to career pipeline. So we're doing a lot better than a lot of places are. So let me go back. The takeaways. Takeaways are we have to continue to address those critical leaks that we were already talking about. College going rates, persistence, college finishing. But it's not enough to just focus on the pipeline itself. We have to continue to close the gaps for students who are underprepared and under-resourced and underrepresented. We have to continue to reach out to our adult learners. But we've got to think of some other game-changing strategies. And among those that were identified in our board retreat are a much greater alignment between our education system and the workforce opportunities. We've got to help students know which of those, where the payoff is. STEM degrees end up having about 3 times as much, you earn about 3 times as much in a STEM degree than in liberal arts degrees, unless you go on for those professional graduate degrees. Do we have the majors and the credentials aligned with the higher growth and high wage jobs that we're talking about? And do we have internships and co-ops and ways for students to get experience too, because it's not just a credential, it's experience in those areas that will help an employer look at them. We also have to really understand these other credentials that are out there and maybe even add it to our goal. I mentioned adult students, and we have to level that playing field so that more minority and low-income students succeed. And of course, we've got to keep focused on how do we make college more affordable. So how can you make a difference? You sit on boards of education institutions. Be sure they're focused on these objectives. The greater alignment and focus we have as a community, the more will get done. You each know, I bet, an adult who has not finished their degree. Tell them to click on our website and then the little tab that says Degrees Matter. We're going to be launching soon a new name for that, but for right now, Degrees Matter. It will connect, we can get them connected with a college coach that will help them re-enroll and complete. Can mentor a student. Use our destinationdegree.org as a tool for that. It lays out what are the steps to getting on the path to a successful career and degree. And please continue to support and expand scholarships, the Rotary Promise Scholarship, and actually help those recipients stick with them and move along their pathway. But mostly, thanks for all you do. Thanks for giving me a chance to share this community challenge with you. And I think together, we will achieve this goal in this community, and in doing so, we will launch Louisville into the top tier of American cities in the innovation economy of the future. Thank you very much.
I'm sure we have a few questions from the floor. Please come up to the mic. I had a question. Compared to other cities, you talked about Nashville. What about Cincinnati and Indianapolis? How are we doing fair with them?
They all rank, Indianapolis, we actually are ahead of them in bachelor degree attainment, but they are all outpacing us in wage, at median wage.
Any
Other questions?
Steph?
I had noticed on the one example that you had, Fayette County was far above us. What's your explanation for Fayette County being so what?
I think one, it's largely driven by a large research university as being, it comprises a much greater percent of their population than does U of L is a percent of our population. And I think that's probably the biggest impact.
Any questions? If not, very good. Thank you so much for your presentation.